Where are you watching this story from? A quiet room, a bustling cafe, or maybe on the road? Drop your location in the comments. We'd love to know where our stories are reaching hearts like yours. If this tale moved you even just a little, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow we'll bring you another chapter, one filled with twists, truths, and maybe a bit of hope. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. So stay with us, one night, one story at a time. From homeless to CEO, no one knew who she really was, they laughed when she walked in. Madeline Brooks, 27 years old, wearing a faded coat, scuffed shoes, and holding a second-hand handbag that didn't belong anywhere near the glimmering chandeliers of the Hayes wedding banquet. People whispered. Some snickered. Who let the beggar in? One woman muttered behind a crystal champagne flute. Maybe she's lost, said another, not even trying to lower her voice. But Madeline didn't flinch. She kept her back straight, her steps steady, and her expression calm. This wasn't the first time she had been judged by appearances, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. What they saw was a girl barely scraping by. What they didn't know was that Madeline Brooks was the CEO of Brooks Ventures, a billion-dollar tech company that had quietly shaken up the West Coast startup scene. She wasn't just someone. They just didn't recognize her. Yet, she had returned to this town for a reason. Not to prove herself, but to close a chapter. This place, these people, they were part of a past that had once tried to break her. A place where she'd been abandoned, mocked, and pushed aside. But she hadn't come back with bitterness. She came back with clarity and power. As she walked through the ballroom, people moved away like she was contagious. She stopped near the cake table, where her cousin, Celeste, stood in a designer gown, clutching the arm of a wealthy but spineless groom. Celeste locked eyes with her and sneered. "You're not invited." Madeline smiled softly. "Didn't need an invitation." Laughter rippled through the room again. But it didn't last long. Because just then, a valet rushed in. "Excuse me, Miss Brooks, your car is ready. The Bentley is parked out front. Shall I bring the black card too?" Silence. The room froze. Celeste's smirk vanished. The groom blinked. A man near the bar dropped his glass. Madeline turned toward the valet and nodded. "Yes, and call Mr. Hayes. Tell him I'll need him at headquarters tomorrow morning for the quarterly brief." It hit them like a cold slap. Madeline wasn't here to beg. She was the one writing checks big enough to buy the whole venue they were standing in. Her name was on headlines they'd scrolled past without reading. Her decisions shaped markets they didn't understand. She was the one who made it out, and came back not to seek validation, but to remind them that success doesn't always wear designer heels or drive up with fanfare. Sometimes it returns quietly, wearing yesterday's shoes, and walks into the room you tried to keep it out of. And when it does, you remember every word you once said, every look you once gave, and realize you were laughing at a billionaire. Madeline didn't stay at the banquet for long. She had made her point. The whispers had turned to silence. The laughter had turned to shame. But the moment she stepped outside into the cold night air, her phone buzzed. Again and again. 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails. All from the same number, her brother, Leo Brooks. She hadn't spoken to Leo in over a year. Not since he'd begged her for $50,000 to cover a business opportunity, which turned out to be nothing more than a gambling debt. Back then, she'd sent the money without hesitation. Family was family, or so she'd believed. Now, staring at her phone, a new message came in, this one from her aunt, Irene. "Your brother's in trouble again. You need to send $200,000 immediately, or he'll lose the house, and maybe his life." Same pattern, same urgency, same emotional blackmail. Madeline clenched her jaw. She drove, through the night, not to run from it, but to face it. When she arrived at the small, run-down house where she had once grown up, the porch light flickered, just like it always had. The screen door creaked open before she even knocked. Irene stood there, arms crossed, already playing the victim. "You finally remembered your family," she said. "No. I remembered how much I let you all take from me," Madeline replied, stepping inside. Leo sat on the couch, pale and trembling, but not from fear. He was high. "Again. You look fancy," he mumbled. "So you gonna save us again, sis? Be the hero?" "I'm not here to save you," she said. "I'm here to ask, where did all the money go? The last 50 grand, the 10 before that, the 1,000 I sent every month for 2 years. A pause. Then Irene snapped. "You think you're better than us now? Just because you got some money? You're still a Brooks. You owe us." Madeline's eyes didn't waver. "I don't owe anyone who only remembers me when they need a check." Leo stood up, swaying slightly. "You left us, Maddie." "No," she said quietly. "You left me. The moment I stopped giving, you stopped calling." She placed a sealed envelope on the coffee table. Inside, a cashier's check for $10,000, enough to cover Leo's rent for a few months if he didn't waste it. "This is the last time," she said. "I won't fund your chaos anymore." As she turned to leave, Irene spat. "You'll regret this. Family always comes back." Madeline looked over her shoulder, calm but fierce. "No. Sometimes family is the fire you have to walk away from to stop getting burned." She walked into the night, her heels clicking softly on the wooden porch. Behind her, the door slammed shut. Ahead of her was power, peace, and a tomorrow that didn't include the people who only showed up when she had something to give. Madeline didn't cry when she left the house. Not this time. She'd wasted too many tears on people who only called when their lives were falling apart, never to ask if hers was. The city lights blurred past her as she drove toward the one place that had ever felt like hers. The penthouse. Suite above Brooks Ventures headquarters. Alone, quiet, 10 stories up, and 1,000,000 miles from the mess she'd just walked away from. But as the elevator doors slid open, someone was already waiting. Julian Hayes, leaning casually against the wall, sleeves rolled, collar slightly undone. There was something about the way he looked at her, like he already knew. "You went back," he said. She gave a slight nod, tossed her keys on the counter. "Should have worn armor." He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. Julian had known Madeline for over 5 years. First as a client, then a partner. Now, something else. Something unspoken. They'd danced around it for years, filling silence with sarcasm, hiding closeness behind deadlines and conference calls. But tonight, that distance cracked. Julian walked over, handed her a glass of wine. "You don't owe them anything." Madeline stared into the deep red swirl. "You sound like someone who's been there." He smirked, sat across from her. "Try being the heir to a real estate empire and telling your father you'd rather build affordable housing than luxury condos. Let's just say I didn't get invited to Thanksgiving." She smiled for the first time that night. They sat like that for a while. No boardrooms, no shareholders, no armor. Just two people tired of carrying the weight of expectation. "You ever get tired of pretending?" she asked. "Every damn day," he said. "But then I remember I'm not pretending. I just haven't told the world who I really am yet." She looked at him then, not as the composed executive, not as the calculated strategist, but as the man who'd been quietly holding her world together. And maybe, just maybe, holding back his own feelings too. "You know," he said, his voice softer now. "You're the strongest person I know. Not because of the company or the money, but because you walked out of that house tonight and didn't look back. Madeline stood up, walked to the window, watching the city breathe below. I don't want to do this alone anymore, she said quietly. Julian stepped behind her. You're not alone. Not unless you want to be. And just like that, the room felt warmer, safer. Not because the world had changed, but because she knew who was standing with her in it. As the night deepened, they didn't talk about titles or IPOs. They talked about dreams, about regrets, about all the things they'd never said out loud. And when Madeline finally rested her head against his shoulder, Julian didn't speak. He just stayed, right there, exactly where she needed him to be. Morning. Sunlight poured into the penthouse, but Madeline Brooks had barely slept. The comfort of Julian's presence the night before had steadied her, but not silenced the storm. She knew peace never lasted long, not in her world, not with what was coming. And what was coming was war. Her phone buzzed at 6:13 a.m. Sharp. Urgent. Board meeting moved. Chad Boone made a move on shares. Victoria Lang involved. Call me. She stared at the screen, heart calm, mind calculating. Julian walked in, coffee in one hand, his phone in the other. You saw it too, huh? She nodded. They're trying to push me out. Chad Boone, a former investor turned rival, had been slowly acquiring voting shares under a maze of shell companies. Victoria Lang, once Madeline's trusted CFO, was the one feeding him inside intel. It wasn't personal, it was business. But that didn't make it hurt any less. Madeline's voice was steady. I want the full list of shareholders, including silent partners. There's no way Chad did this alone. Julian handed her a flash drive. Already ahead of you. Also, check this out. He clicked the TV on. A financial news anchor was reporting. Unconfirmed sources suggest a leadership shakeup at Brooks Ventures. Stock prices have already dipped 3.5% overnight due to fears of instability at the top. Madeline didn't flinch. She'd built this company from the ground up. She'd worked through nights, sacrificed friendships, lost sleep, and held it together when no one else would. And now, they thought they could take it away with some whispers and a power play? Not a chance. She stood, poured her cold coffee down the sink, and grabbed her coat. Julian, she said, fire in her voice. Clear your calendar. We're going to the office. Today they find out whose name is really on the door. By 9 a.m., the boardroom was full. Chad Boone sat at the far end, smug, confident. Victoria Lang wore a sleek black suit and a smile too sharp to be friendly. Madeline walked in last, heels crisp against the tile, eyes unreadable. Before we begin, Chad said, I'd like to introduce a motion to replace the current CEO with someone more future-focused. Julian smirked, watching from his seat beside the legal team. Madeline didn't blink. Future-focused? Is that what we're calling insider trading now? The room shifted. She tapped the laptop in front of her, then turned the screen to the board. Security footage. Victoria in a closed-door meeting with Chad. Audio recordings. Trade documents signed using a forged digital signature. Gasps filled the room. Let me be very clear, Madeline said, voice like steel. I don't play games, and I don't lose what I built. Chad stood up, trying to argue, but Julian spoke first. Sit down, Chad. The vote isn't going your way. By the time the meeting ended, Victoria had been removed. Chad's assets were frozen pending investigation. Madeline walked out of the boardroom with her head high. The empire was still hers, but she knew this wasn't over. And next time, they'd come harder. The headlines hit before noon. Brooks Ventures, CEO exposes espionage attempt. Former CFO and partner under federal investigation. Madeline didn't have time to celebrate. She sat in her office, high above the city, overlooking the skyline she had once only dreamed of reaching. In front of her were 2 folders, one with the final acquisition papers for Boone's shares, the other with a resignation letter. Not hers. Victoria Lang's, delivered under legal counsel just before she was escorted out. Julian walked in, holding a small box. "Victory gift," he said, setting it on her desk. She raised an eyebrow. "Victory? You kept your company. You crushed a hostile takeover. And," he smirked, "you still haven't cried once." She smiled for the first time in days. "Don't jinx it." She opened the box. Inside wasn't jewelry or some trophy. It was a set of vintage car keys. "To your father's '67 Mustang," Julian said. "I found it, fixed it up. Thought you should have something that reminds you where you came from." Her breath caught in her throat. No one had ever done something like that for her, not without expecting something in return. And suddenly, it all hit at once. The battles, the betrayal, the pain. And this one person who had stood beside her through every storm. She didn't cry. Not then, but she did say something she'd never said before. "I love you." 1 month later, the vineyard in Napa was soaked in golden light. Not 100 guests, not even 50, just the people who mattered. Madeline walked down the aisle barefoot, on purpose, because after all that time in heels, she wanted to feel the earth again. She wore a silk dress, simple and elegant. Nothing flashy. No crown. No veil. Just her. Julian stood waiting, looking like every promise she never thought she'd be able to keep. The vows weren't long. There were no fireworks, no PR. But when he said, "I will never let you face this world alone again," she believed every word. And when she whispered, "You were never just beside me. You were the reason I didn't fall," he smiled like the man who had been holding that in for years. Justice had been served. Boone was indicted. Victoria disappeared from headlines entirely. And Brooks Ventures, now stronger than ever, announced a new initiative, offering grants to female-led startups, especially those from underserved communities. Madeline knew what it felt like to be counted out. She knew how many brilliant women would never get their shot unless someone opened a door. So she built them. And through it all, Julian stayed, her partner in business, in battle, and now, in life. As the sun dipped behind the vineyard hills, Madeline looked out at the horizon. For once, the future didn't look like a fight. It looked like peace. What would you have done if you were in Madeline's shoes, walked away quietly, or returned like she did, stronger than ever? Her journey wasn't just about building an empire. It was about reclaiming her worth, choosing love over power, and breaking free from the people who only showed up when she had something to give. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Which moment hit you the hardest? Was it the betrayal by her family, the quiet strength in Julian's support, or that boardroom scene where she took her power back? Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And what part of Madeline's story resonated with you the most? Let's turn this space into a community of voices. Your perspective might help someone else going through something similar. And don't forget to subscribe. We've got another story coming tomorrow. And trust me, it's one you won't want to miss. Because here, every story matters. Every voice counts. And sometimes, healing starts with just saying, "That could have been me. We're listening." Now it's your turn to share.